So a lot of people sometimes say that I hate every movie I watch. Truth be told, I probably think about a third of the movies I watch are good or great, about a third are awful, and about a third are okay or passable. And this is one of the first category. This is a really good movie. I highly recommend you go see it. If for no other reason than just kind of the historical significance of it. Because you can't really get more quintessentially American or Americana than McDonald's. It's synonymous with America in the way probably no other brand is, other than maybe Coca-Cola, but Coca-Cola is sold at McDonald's. Anyways, though, yeah, this was a really good movie. Michael Keaton did an amazing job in it. I'm kind of happy Michael Keaton has a career again after getting typecast for years. He made a movie basically bemoaning how he was typecast called Birdman. And now he's actually in movies again. And he's a really good actor. He does a really, really good job in this movie. So without further ado, let's kind of get into the founder. So I think the founder really kind of encapsulates the best and worst of America. On one hand, America, in contrast to most other countries, this isn't as true as it used to be even a couple decades ago. But the promise of America is if you were smart, you had a good idea, and you were willing to work hard, you could make your way to the top. You could make your living. You could become a famous artist. You could be somebody. And that's why a lot of people left the old world with a much more rigid class structure and came to America because they wanted that personal freedom. They wanted that ability to, even if society wasn't always as supportive of them as some other states were, and even if the welfare state wasn't historically as big as some of the European countries, you could go to America, you could do something, you could be someone, you could own your own bit of land, etc. And that's kind of part of what the premise, I think, of America is. And I guess that's a very kind of mainstream conservative way of looking at it, but there's a lot of truth to that. The pioneers left behind, while not great, very stable and predictable lives in Europe to go to the New World. And in some cases, the land they bought had trees on it, well, forests on it, and they had to spend decades clearing out all the trees and building a farm. But the harder they worked, the more they were able to accomplish. If they worked a bit harder, they could build a cabin, they could upgrade that cabin, they could make it bigger, they could plant more stuff, they could grow more crops. In America, the more work you put in and the more ingenuity you put in, you could see the results of it. And all that individual initiative, all that people trying to make a name for themselves, it was kind of, I think, an emblematic of Adam Smith's concept of the invisible hand. Basically, that the market naturally optimizes things. That the profit motive will mean that things will become optimal, goods will be distributed in the most efficient way possible because everybody wants to make money. There's spontaneous order is kind of another Smithian concept. And I'm not an economist, but spontaneous order is basically if there's a buck to be made, then something will happen. Something will show up to take its place. The entire premise of Dragon's Den and Shark Tank is there's all these problems that people don't even necessarily know exist, but because there's profit in it, people will create all sorts of innovative and amazing solutions to problems. And that's kind of the bright side of America. America is and probably still is the most prosperous country on earth. It's where most innovation comes from. It's what drives the world economy. And I think a lot of that is to that individual ingenuity, that belief in hard work. And while I have a lot of issues with that, and we can discuss that in another video, particularly in the modern era, I think a lot of the founder celebrates that. On the other hand, though, you have the dark side of American society, which is America is to a certain extent a plutocracy. A plutocracy is where your social standing is based solely on the amount of money you have. And this movie really shows it. You're not necessarily judged on whether you're an honorable person, whether you're a good person, whether you're a moral person, but how much money you have and how good you are at making money is the only thing that matters. And this was something John Paul II got into when he was talking about capitalism. He said, capitalism, if by capitalism we mean people have private property, they can run their own businesses, you let the market allocate goods, strong private property rights, etc., he said, then that is good, and that is fully in line with Catholic social teaching. But he said maybe it's better to call it a market economy, a free economy, or a business economy. And then he said there's also capitalism as a political and social system, which is where human dignity and kind of all sorts of morals are shunted aside in favor of the almighty dollar. So I think there can and should be a balance between the two of them. But without further ado, let's get into the founder. So the founder follows the character of Ray Kroc, played by Michael Keaton. I'll just call him Ray for the rest of this. So he's a traveling salesman who has a small milkshake company. So he sells milkshake makers. He apparently has had a large number of different scam businesses over the years, like a bed that folds down in the kitchen, which sounds like a really bad idea, and like paper cups, and all these other things. And despite that, they have a fairly comfortable life with his wife. His wife is very supportive of him and has stood by him all the time when he had his various get-rich-quick schemes. And they've actually made enough money that they have a nice house in the suburbs and they can live pretty comfortably. But Ray just has to keep having more. So he started this whole harebrained milkshake scheme to sell all these like industrial-sized milkshake makers. And it's not really going well. The first part of the movie is just him wandering around. There's like a montage of him trying to sell these milkshake makers. And kind of the takeaway from the beginning of the movie is how diners used to work in America. If you wanted supposed fast food, is you'd go and park your car in a parking lot, and then some girl in a skimpy outfit would skate over to you, take your order, go back in. They'd fully cook your order like at a normal restaurant, and then they'd skate back out with it. And there was no obvious or easy way to keep track of whose order was who. Restaurants would have like a billion items on the menu. Most of them wouldn't be prepared particularly well. Logistics didn't really work very well, so the food was frozen for long amounts of time. And it was just in general a mess, and when the food got out, it was cold. There was also other issues like cigarette machines. Kind of diners and stuff were known for just having a lot of shady characters and a lot of punk kids. So as he's going around, he's just like, these diners are horrible quality. So then he gets a call that there's two brothers named Mac and Dick McDonald who order 5 milkshake machines, which is more than he sold in his entire business trip. So he finds out that they're in California, so he goes all the way to California to see what it is these brothers are doing. So he goes to this restaurant, and he finds it extremely clean. There's a huge lineup, but it goes by extremely quickly. So he goes to the order area, and he's not really sure what he's doing. He's like, what do you have? And they're like, we have burgers, fries, milkshakes, and Coca-Cola. And he's like, I guess I'll take a burger and fries and Coca-Cola. And he hands them the money. And then immediately they hand him the food. And he's used to waiting like 40 minutes to get his food. And he's utterly shocked by it. And he's just in disbelief. And he thinks it's someone else's food. And he just can't get it. And then he goes and sits down and he eats the burger. And he says, this is a really good hamburger. It's nice and fresh. It's consistently cooked. And then he notices, he eats there a couple times, and he notices that the burgers are always the same. They always are of decent quality. And people don't think of McDonald's as being good quality today, but you have to understand, back before all this stuff was kind of industrialized and standardized, people would do a lot of shady stuff. They'd make a lot of just really low quality food. And at least at McDonald's, you knew what you were getting. And I do like McDonald's burgers. I don't think they're that bad. Especially the double cheeseburger or the bacon McDouble. They're both great. But yeah, the food is very good. And it's fastly made. So then he basically offers to take the brothers out for dinner because he wants to know their story. So they explain that during the recession, so they had opened a movie theater right before the Great Depression. It fell apart. They founded a semi-successful diner, but then the town kind of became a ghost town. So they moved the town over by sawing the diner in half and then transporting it on 2 trucks. So then they reset up the diner, and over time they find that they're just kind of having mediocre returns. They aren't really making much money. And then they kind of, the younger brother, Dick, has a flash of insight. He goes over the ledgers. He's a very smart man. He says 90% of our sales are Coca-Cola, hamburgers, and French fries. So why don't we just make those 3 items, but do it really fast and make sure they're very consistent quality? So he completely custom redesigns the restaurant. He redesigns all of the equipment. It's all completely custom built. While the restaurant is being created, renovated, they take all the staff, they go to a tennis court, and he draws the kitchen on the tennis court. And he has the people pretend to work and move around, and so he can kind of see the most efficient way, efficiency of motion to get people to. So they can make things extremely quickly. They redesign the kitchen setup, so they're able to just massively put out hamburgers and French fries. They have all these like regulations and stuff, like you can only cook hamburgers for a certain amount of time. You need to use a precise amount of spice on them. They have a special machine to make sure every McDonald's hamburger has just the right amount of ketchup, mustard, and a pickle. So everything's just completely standardized, and it moves incredibly quickly, and it dramatically reduced the overhead. And they combine that with, they got rid of the cigarette machines, they keep the place really clean, and families really like to go there. The other thing that they invented was the disposable packages. Everything's wrapped up in paper, you throw it out when you're done. Before that, all places had the plates, and the plates were put on the side of cars. I don't know if you ever see in the Flintstones where they put the weird kind of rack thing on the side of the car and it falls over. That's what they used to do if you went to a diner. They'd put that on the side of your car, and they put your food there in a plate, and people would be going around with these plates on roller skates. It was dangerous, and the plates got broken, but there's no cleanup. It's nice and easy. That's kind of when we started to get takeout. People could just order a bunch of burgers in a bag and take them to go. So families started going there, and they started to have like McDonald's days where they'd have jugglers and clowns and that sort of thing. So McDonald's kind of became family-friendly fun. So they kind of combined wholesomeness with mass production, with quality control, and they created an extremely popular business. Now, they attempted to expand out, and they had 5 franchisees. The problem is they couldn't maintain quality. The new restaurants immediately started downgrading the menu or adding a bunch of other items. And the dream of McDonald's was that everything would be the same. The quality would be kept from restaurant to restaurant to restaurant across the country. So Ray Kroc basically talks them into letting him be the franchise, to be the manager. To be the manager of the franchises, to be in charge of expanding McDonald's across America. So the contract is the brothers get 0.5% of the gross revenue of the company, and they have complete control over whatever goes on in the restaurants. So while he's in their office, he sees concept art of a McDonald's with a big golden arch. And when he sees that, he has a revelation. He says, you go around town, you see crosses on churches, you see American flags. I want to make the golden arch the third symbol. He drives all the way to Phoenix to see the restaurant they built with the arches, and he knows he has to do it. So Ray immediately begins to expand across the country. He opens up his own McDonald's. He opens up more and more and more. His wife is supportive to him throughout the entire movie. He won't let her get involved in the business. He won't spend time with her. She's basically just kind of a house pet that he comes home to every now and again. So he mortgages his home. He's getting everything going. There's new McDonald's restaurants all over the place. There's the issue with maintaining quality standards, though. In general, because a lot of the early McDonald's were opened by wealthy businessmen who weren't interested in actually running the restaurant. All they wanted was to make money, and so long as it was making money, they weren't interested. So it moves from that, and Ray begins to recruit people who are like plumbers or electricians or self-made men or salesmen or people who are used to working hard and used to being really involved in their businesses, and he gets them to open McDonald's. Now the problem is he gets very little money from the franchisees, and despite massive expansion, the company's in constant trouble. So while this is all happening, he visits a place in the Twin Cities who builds 2 McDonald's himself and brings up the idea of switching their milkshakes to powdered milkshakes, which Ray says taste pretty much the same. Now, the ideas come up with the guy in the Twin Cities' wife, Joan, who Ray is in love with at first sight, and they have a highly sexual scene where they play the piano together. And now Ray's convinced that he has to seduce her and make her his because she's really interested in the business, she understands the business, she frequently comes up with ideas for the business. So despite the fact he never had his wife involved in anything, he's determined to abandon his wife and make off with a friend and someone who gives him money's wife because Ray Kroc is a terrible person. So a bunch of other stuff happens, and he realized that he has a very bad contract with the McDonald's brothers because he can't make any decisions to make money. He can't add advertising to McDonald's. He can't do promotional deals. He can't switch their extremely expensive walk-in freezers to powdered milkshakes. And the business is making money and is gradually going bankrupt. So what he decides to come up with is he meets a executive, and his idea is what they're going to do is buy huge amounts of land and then lease it to the various franchisees. So the franchisees are paying them a share of the profits, but they're also paying a lease to Ray. And if they fall through and they can't make the payments, then he can just sell the lease and the building on it to another franchisee. So it gives him complete control over all the franchisees, as he can cancel their contract at any time. It gives them a lot of good real estate in key parts of the town, because McDonald's they try to position them where there's a lot of traffic. And it dramatically increases the company's revenue. So Ray basically, because he has a separate country, the agreement with the McDonald's brothers only applies to the McDonald's brothers. So because of that, he's able to more or less take control in a coup. Now, is this legal? Probably not. So he does that, and he just makes powdered milk the standard for every McDonald's store. And the brothers try to oppose him, and he's like, look, I've got millions of dollars. You'd probably win if you sued me. You don't have the money to sue me, so I'm just going to break the law and violate my contract. So he does a bunch of douchey things like... So he founds the McDonald's Corporation. So we go through a bunch of drama. And basically, one of the brothers almost dies from diabetic shock because of all the stress he's under with Ray Kroc stealing the company from them. So Ray goes to them and he says, look, I want to settle this. I want you completely out of the picture. And he gives them a blank check. And he's like, ask for any amount of money you want. I'll give it to you. I just want you completely out of it. So the brothers tried to accept it. They say they want $2.7 million, 1% of all future earnings, the original McDonald's restaurant they created, and the San Bernardino restaurant, which was their second McDonald's, as well as 1% of all future earnings. So Ray says that he can't provide the 1% of earnings in the contract because it would spook out current and future investors. He says, don't worry guys, on my word of honor, you'll totally get those 1% of all earnings. Later on in the bathroom, Dick asks Ray why he had to own the McDonald's brother chain of diners, and he says it wasn't about the system, it wasn't about anything else. It was about that name McDonald's. It was as American as apple pie. Dick points out that you'll never truly own the name, and Ray says you're sure about that. So Ray threatens to sue the brothers unless they take down the sign on their restaurant that says McDonald's. So the McDonald's brothers have to take down the sign on the restaurant that they built. The brothers do get $1 million each, though. So, I mean, in 1960s money, that's like $7 million now. He also now begins to build restaurants across the street from the two other existing McDonald's from the original company and drives them out of business, so they're forced to close. So he succeeds in destroying every aspect of the brothers' legacy and covers it up by coming up with a completely false story about how he came up with the concept and invented it entirely by himself. Ray succeeded in seducing the wife of that guy the guy who was a friend of his. So Joan became a successful businesswoman herself, and she donated most of Ray's money to charity before she died herself. Billions of dollars on the total. And McDonald's currently feeds 1% of the Earth's population on a daily basis. So like I said, this movie really has the best and worst of America. You have Ingenuity, which completely transformed the food industry, changed the way people live, and made one of kind of the largest companies in history and one of the most persistent signs of Americana. On the other hand, despite all this success and wealth generated, on the other hand, you have a man who's probably a sociopath who set out to destroy the two brothers solely out of his own ego and who cheated them out of billions of dollars in profits. Now, he did give them the equivalent of $7 million a day today each, so they were able to live the rest of their lives in relative comfort, but he had destroyed and stole their dream. And did it maliciously because he had to be the best. Throughout the movie, he constantly says that he needs more and more and more and more. He needs to just take everything in the world and own it himself. So Ray is kind of the archetypical example of someone who has immense amounts of pride and who probably is from everything we see in the movie, an absolutely horrible person. But his pride motivates him to be ambitious, to work hard, and to invent all sorts of kind of interesting new things and kind of completely changed the way we look at the fast food industry and really became the birth of the fast food industry. So you kind of have a man with various virtues and vices. I think overall he's kind of the archetypical example of someone who sells their soul to the devil. Whether you mean that metaphorically in terms of he sacrifices his personal decency and morality in order to get ahead, or if he made a literal deal with Beelzebub, the outcome is more or less the same. So, I really like the movie. I recommend to go see it. Sorry if I had a little trouble describing it, because the movie's extremely heavy on exposition in order to tell the story. But it's a great story. It's one of the fundamental stories of American capitalism. I highly recommend seeing it.